Sound speeds. And you may be wondering, who is that guy in the thumbnail? Well, remember a few months ago when I put the word out asking if there were any independent content creators interested in producing sound-related content for you guys to watch here on Sound Speeds? Well, a guy, believe it or not, in the next town over named Barron Guillard, a videographer, reached out with an idea about testing camera preamps for self-noise and how to get the best results. So without further delay, I'll let him do the rest.
So I shoot video for a lot of events like weddings and, mitzvahs and sports and, corporate presentations, things like that. And most of the time I'm shooting all by myself or with just a second shooter to collect additional angles with the camera. So what that means is not only do I have to get all of the video that the client needs, I also have to make sure that I get all of the audio that the client needs. But because I am also filming at the same time, I can't really monitor most of my audio sources. Now, most of the time I'm going to have some field recorders plugged into, the mixing board or the DJ's, turntable-y thing or whatever they may have. But my primary audio recording device is also the camera that I have in my hand. So the majority of the audio that I'm going to be recording is going to come from a microphone like this directly on top of the camera, which is not ideal, but I don't have a dedicated sound guy or sound crew that can boom a microphone on top of the talent. And, and a lot of times that would be kind of distracting, especially at a wedding. That would be a little weird. Now, the reason why this is my main source of audio is because this is the only source of audio that I can actually monitor in any way, shape, or form throughout the event. So because I already have the camera in my hand because I'm filming the event, I can use the audio level inputs on that camera to make sure that I'm at least not clipping. Some cameras might even have a headphone output, which is nice, but I hardly ever use that because it's very distracting to the people in the event when you stick out too much. You kind of want to blend in. So most of the time, I'm just looking at the levels. Now, my practice has always been to turn the gain up or down depending on how far away the sound source is from my camera or microphone, because they're on top of each other. Now, if the subject is too far away, I already know I'm not going to get a clean signal, and that's okay in most situations because you have that sort of natural distance between the lens and the subject anyway. So in theory, this method should be able to work great and consistently amongst all cameras and microphones. I should be able to know what to expect just by doing this method and making sure that the signal is not clipping. However, I keep finding that this is not the case. The problem that I kept running into is that sometimes it seemed like the noise floor, the self-noise of the preamp inside the camera, was far noisier than in other clips. 90% of the time, it would sound fine, great, and it would act exactly as I expected. However, occasionally it'd just be ridiculously noisy. So I needed to find out why that was. So of course, the best way for me to figure out what is happening is to test all of my equipment. And because I am an Uber nerd, I love to do this kind of testing. And by Uber nerd, I do not mean that I am a nerd who rides in the ride-sharing app thing. No, I mean, it means that I have umlauts. Now, the first thing that I need to do is determine exactly what it is that I am testing. Now, I own several cameras, but I use two primarily when I shoot events, the Panasonic GH5 and the Sony A6400. And with those cameras, I use a variety of different microphones, but most of the time it's one of these two. This is the Asden SMX15, and this is the Rode Video Micro. It's tiny. So the first thing I need to do is determine how much self-noise the preamp in both cameras is generating. Now, there's a couple ways that I could do this. The way that I chose to do it was use this microphone since it has an on-off switch. I plug this in, and when you plug in something into the microphone input on these cameras, it engages the preamp. But then I just turn off the microphone itself. Therefore, there's no signal coming in, so the signal that it's recording is just the noise that the preamp is generating. But don't worry, if you don't have a microphone with an on-off switch, you probably have one of these little microphone cable things for, similar microphone things. Just plug in one side and don't plug in the other side to anything. And then that's, again, going to activate the preamp, but it's not going to record anything. But when you do that, just make sure, you're not just, touching the end because that makes that weird humming noise. Yeah, don't do that. So now that I've run that test on both of those cameras, I need to figure out exactly what the microphones are adding to that noise floor. Now, the Rode Video Micro is a passive sort of shotgun doohickey mic thing. It doesn't require any power. It has no switches, no buttons, nothing. So this one's pretty simple. When I'm testing this one, I'm just going to select different gain settings on each camera and record the results. Now, the SMX15 or any other sort of powered on-camera video microphone is going to have different gain settings. This one has a 10 decibel cut, as well as a 20 decibel gain thing, as well as, of course, 0 settings. So for this microphone, I need to pick one setting, go through the different gain settings on my camera and record the results, then do the exact same test again at the different gain setting for the microphone. So that's 3 different times I'm running that series of tests just for this microphone. Now, of course, when we have the microphones plugged in, any sound is going to be recorded by the microphones, which is not what we want. We want to know what the noise floor is. We don't want any sound. But I don't own a sound vacuum chamber thing that completely isolates all noise from the known world. I don't have this. But what I do have is a bedroom closet. And this is going to work out pretty well because it has a couple of my shirts in it and a couple thousand of my wife's shirts and pants and all kinds of things in there. And with all that fabric in one little space, it's going to dampen any sort of noise that's trying to get in from the outside world. It's not going to be perfect. And, you know, we have to be accepting that it's not going to be perfect, but it's going to work out pretty well. So when I ran this test, I would just set these settings on the camera and microphones as needed, press record, put that camera inside the closet, close the closet door, and I would wait about 30 seconds. That way, if there's any movement from the clothes in the closet, they would be able to settle down, or if there was any, the noise coming, I don't know. I just wanted to make sure I had enough signal to make sure that I got the best result as possible. After that 30 seconds was up, I would then take the camera back out of the closet and start the next round of tests. And when you're finished, make sure that you give your puppy a treat for not barking and ruining your tests, because that's important. Now, I did not have enough time to run every single gain setting on the camera in this fashion. So what I did was I picked about 6 decibel increases in, little chunks of 6 decibels, so I could get a good idea of how it's responding in those increments. I picked 6 decibels because both cameras meter slightly differently on how it works. Like the Sony starts at 0, which is off. You can actually turn the preamp off in the A6400, and then goes from 1 to 31. But the GH5 from Panasonic, that one starts at -12 and then goes all the way to +6. And there is no way you can go any lower than the -12, which in some cases is not quite quiet enough. But that's how it works. Now, I wanted to be able to compare the results between the 2 cameras and the microphones on each camera to see if one camera was going to be performing better than the other one in particular situations. So now that I have made the recordings, I need to determine how much noise is present on each one of those recordings. So I use Reaper. That's my digital audio workstation of choice because Pro Tools is for teenagers or professionals. I just don't like Pro Tools, but you can use any digital audio workstation. It'll probably work just fine. I use Reaper though, and let's fire it up now. So what I did next was load the audio from every single one of those clips into a separate track in Reaper. Now, the next thing I did was add the General Dynamics plugin, which is a free plugin that comes with Reaper. I added that to every single track. Then I would play each track and see on the plugin exactly where the noise was falling. So at that point, I had a lot of numbers, but I needed a way to take those numbers so I could interpret them into something that I could actually use when I'm filming things. So I put together this graph on my iPad because, it's an iPad, it's fun, I get to draw on things. So here with the Panasonic GH5, the first thing that I'm adding is the internal preamps. This is the baseline. And for the most part, everything is acting the way that I would expect it to, except look at the -12 setting. It's a huge jump in a noise floor. Now, this was a little bit weird, and as you see when I add in the Rode here and then the Asden at 0, and here's the Asden at -10, and here's the Asden at +20. If you look at -12, obviously because it added the noise to begin with, doesn't matter what microphone I'm using, there's going to be this huge, giant jump in noise at that lowest possible setting. Now, I did go back later and double check 11, just the -11, and it is just fine. It is just -12 that goes, I don't know why, but that does happen. The other thing that's interesting to note is that the Asden with the 10 decibel cut only cuts about 3 or 4 decibels of noise. So if I do use the 10 decibel cut, it's going to be pretty noisy. Noisier than it ought to be. Now here's a graph for the Sony a6400. Here's the internal preamp noise here, and again, for the most part, everything looks about the same, except look right here at 12. This is the setting 12, and there's just a little spike. Once again, there's a spike. Now, I went back and checked this one. This was about a 3 or 4 decibel range where it just spikes up like this. So between 10 and 14, huge amounts of noise on the Sony, just in that spot. But everything else looks like it's working the way that you would expect it to. And when you add in, of course, the Rode Video Micro, the Asden set to 0, the Asden set to -10, and the Asden set to +20, you can see that all of those are also have that spike there in the middle. So what this says to me is I'm not going to be setting any gain there. I just need to avoid that on this particular Sony a6400. So this is great. I got some awesome stuff. So I would think that I would be able to use this exact same information for every single camera of that model, correct? Oh no. No. In the past, I've had to rent additional cameras for larger projects, and even though they were the exact same camera model and all of the settings might be exactly the same, the noise floor will be different from camera to camera, even of the same model. I once rented a GH5 that did not have a noise issue at all. Mine does. I've rented a Sony camera that was absolutely unusable at any gain setting. So once I ran all these tests and I could use this information while I was shooting, I got way, way better results. But as I was saying before, it's different for every single camera. So if you are going to be using the preamps in your camera, I recommend that you run a similar test like this so you can find out exactly what's going on. If you're lucky, it's going to act the way that you expect it to. If you're unlucky like me, I guess, you're going to have weird things. I don't know why it happens. I didn't design the circuit. But it does happen. Be aware of it. I hope that helps. That's everything I got for you today. I hope it was helpful, and I hope that I can come back to sound speeds once again, and maybe with some more sound advice.
Have a question you'd like answered or want to add something? Be sure to write it in the comment section down below. You can also make a suggestion for future topics of discussion. Again, comment section down below, or you can email me at soundspeeds@yahoo.com. Be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss out on future sound advice.